Hey, this is Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We'd love for you to join us live. I ran across an article from the American College Health Association group. It's a 2014 study. Something they claim, quote, is very disturbing happening on college campuses. What they found was that 94% of our counseling center directors reported a steady increase in the number of college students with severe psychological problems. And 89% reported an increase in the number of students arriving on campus who were already taking prescription medication for anxiety or depression. Coupled with an increase in diagnosable psychiatric disorders is a reported decline in average student resilience, meaning the ability to manage and or bounce back from the various bumps of everyday life. Referring to Dr. Peter Gray's post last year in Psychology Today, the column also noted that, quote, students are increasingly having emotional crises over problems of everyday life, such as conflicts with roommates or receiving bad grades. So what's the reason for this declined resilience among college students? Well, the article cites several possibilities. They talk about helicopter parenting. They talk about an overly regimented K through 12 system. They talk about the perception that the academic and economic world is more competitive and less forgiving than in the recent past. Cummins eventually concludes in favor of that last possibility, believing the perception that today's world is harsher and is in fact too much of a reality. The author of this piece that I read disagrees. He says, if you know even a tiny bit about 20th century history, you know that previous generations also had plenty of stressful situations to deal with. We're not unique in that regard. Classic philosophy saw anxiety as rooted in locating one's happiness in things beyond one's control. If students or their parents are placing their hopes or happiness on good grades, admittance to certain schools, or upward social mobility, and believe that through their maneuvering they can guarantee these outcomes, well, that's a recipe for increased anxiety. If we are seeing greater levels of anxiety today among students, it's probably more attributable to a widespread spiritual sickness in American society than merely changed external circumstances. Well, inquiring minds want to know. And I had my curiosity tweaked. And so I looked around at what was really going on. I think that the emphasis here is more on what's happening in the home than what's happening in the universities, colleges, or even in the public schools or in society. It's more of what I would call creative parenting. This idea that children are just small adults and that they can handle life's pressures and responsibilities simply because they're here and they don't appear to be traumatized by them. Well, they are being traumatized in a sense. We rarely see true parenting in America anymore. And one of the reasons we don't see true parenting is because parents don't have time for it. Parents are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. They tweet, they YouTube, they email. They have the TV on. They're consumed with their own issues. And the child? Well, the child is expected to handle life the way the parents do. The child is expected to know how, because the parents do. The child is simply a smaller version of them. Right? No. We shovel our kids off to grandma. That's a good thing if it has to be done. We shovel them off to daycare. I call them kennels for children. We get them up early. We feed them and throw them in the car. We take them off to these places where they spend 6, 8, 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, being imprinted psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, socially by strangers. And then we bring them home. And now that they're home, we have all sorts of chores that we didn't get done during the day, not the least of which is eating or cleaning or doing some errands, or maybe there's something that needs to be done that evening at the neighbor's house or a family event, or something, a school event, something's going on. These poor kids are pretty much on their own. On the other side, we have parents that are hovering. Helicopter parents. They hover over their children as though they are delicate china. Children that could break at any moment. These children are not permitted to fall down and get dirty, to have any frustrations or lack anything they or the parents think might be important. In short, these children never experience the frustrations of life and so are not equipped when life does what life does. The simple reality of life is that which does not kill you makes you strong. Children need to learn that not everything exists for their benefit, that their home or their bedroom is not an amusement park, that they are responsible to protect and to preserve their belongings, that if they break or lose something, there won't be a replacement unless it's important to their survival, and then they will have to pay for it. That should they break or lose something important, there will be consequences. You do this, you get that, is a critical dynamic in raising children. In short, children need to be raised by charactered individuals. People who are orderly, disciplined, responsible, careful, honest, truthful, and so forth and so on. There are over 50 or 60 character qualities. You need to have the list. You need to work through the list and know them. These children are not going to learn any of this by osmosis. It has to be taught. Children need to understand that life is largely what you make of it. Disappointments will come. It's what you do with them or about them that matters most. Parents need to know that one of the most important things they can do for their children is to love their mate. We are now in generation 5 of a society that knows little or nothing about life, about love, about parenting, responsibility, accountability. And did I mention character? These children are growing up in a world that isn't real, and then when reality strikes, they're ill-equipped to handle it. What's the missing ingredient? Biblical values, Christian character, godly morality. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, 62,939 cases of child sexual abuse were reported in 2012. But they also state that only 30% of cases got reported. 62,939 represents 30% of the child sex abuse cases in America in 2012. That's less than a third. American parents have more reason to fear child molesters than they do Islamic jihadists. Why? Because the culture glorifies pornography and denigrates biblical morality. The pornography attack on the minds of men and women of all ages is breeding sexual terrorism, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business in America. In our public schools, the big lie that's being sold is that we're just animals and we have diverse sexual desires. Nothing is wrong. Everything's okay. Children are told it's wrong to pass judgment on sexual preferences. But then the parents want to hurt people who molest their children sexually. Parents, you can't have it both ways. You need to protect your children. That might mean get them out of a public school. That might mean turn that TV off. That might mean shut down your electronics. It definitely means raise them in a loving, structured, protective environment. They will see the dark side of life, but it ought to shock them. If they see too much of it, they're not shocked anymore. And that's a bad thing. The world wants you to raise children to be accustomed to the dark and dirty side of life, to expose them to just about every filthy, immoral, ungodly word, behavior, or attitude possible. To do what? To prepare them for life as it is. So how's that working? Psychology Today says students are increasingly having emotional crises over problems of everyday life, such as conflicts with roommates or receiving bad grades, not to mention severe psychological problems. The 89% increase in the number of students arriving on campus already taking prescription medication for anxiety and depression. What's that tell you? We have created a false reality, and we're medicating people so that they don't go nuts in the midst of it. We're doing that. You want to blame somebody? Look in the mirror. It's a parental problem. It's not a federal government problem. It's not a public school problem. It's not a social problem. It's a parent problem. What are the next 5 generations of children going to look like?